Coverage of the Mackinac Policy Conference is brought to you in large part by our members. You can join them, like Jerry Mangona, at patreon.com/dailydetroit. That's patreon.com/dailydetroit. Hello, friends, and welcome to Your Daily Detroit. It is Monday, June 6th, 2022. I am back from Mackinac Island, but I've got a lot of conversations to share with you. And this particular one, I just wanted to move to the front of the line because it's with the head of SMART. And I think there's a new vision ahead for mass transit in our region. And I was excited to talk to him and see how he is going to approach this problem that, frankly, our leaders have been banging their heads against for decades. So, without further ado, let's just jump into it. Joining me at the table at the Grand Hotel, Dwight Ferrell. He is the newish, not quite new, but newish general manager of the Suburban Mobility Authority for Regional Transportation. You know them as SMART, and it's the only time I'm going to use that full term. But I am excited to talk to you. You know, in your previous job, you spent 4 years heading up Go Metro in Cincinnati. You've worked in Atlanta, Austin, Dallas, Philadelphia. So why here? Why now?
Divine intervention.
Okay.
I'm a person of deep faith, and I think that God puts you at the right place at the right time when he does what he wants you to do. And I had never heard of SMART before the recruiter called me. And I actually got SMART and the RTA confused. I knew about the RTA and I knew about DDOT, but I didn't know about SMART. And so when they called and I read the position profile and talked to the recruiter, I said, well, this is like they wrote this for me. They didn't know me and I didn't know them. I had taken some time off after my mom died, dealt with a significant back issue. And so I was bored, and then this perfect opportunity came about, looking to do something exciting with public transportation.
And this is a town that had a lot of people talk about doing something exciting with public transportation, but we've kind of banged our head against the wall for a long time trying to take it to the next level.
Well, I think that's happened in a lot of places. When I was in Cincinnati, they were still on a funding model that went back probably 30 years that was really insufficient to sustain the transportation system. And one of the things I was tasked with was getting them to switch from a earnings tax, which was based just in the city of Cincinnati, to a countywide sales tax. And the vote happened after I left, but the plan was the plan that I put in place. And so I'm really excited about that. And it just shows that you can talk to people, much like what Van Jones talked about yesterday in his session. If you can find people where they are, regardless of where they are on the political spectrum, then you can get something done.
Well, it's kind of analogous to transit, right? You want to meet people where they're at.
Well, that's exactly what you have to do. I've been in this business for 42 years. I started my career as a bus operator and worked my way up. I have seen how when the perception of transportation is changed in a region, it helps transform the region. The issues here are the same issues that a lot of places have. Quite frankly, a lot of them have to do with socioeconomic and race. And once you can move those to the side and deal with the economic impact that public transportation has on a region and attracting jobs and retaining jobs and getting people to work, then it makes a huge, huge difference.
Well, you know, people like to say, well, somebody should pull themselves up by the bootstraps. But I think if you don't have an area with transit that gets people where they need to go, you're saying that, but you're not giving them any boots or straps.
Well, I'll take this a step further. Regardless of whether you use the system or not, there's a lot of things that you wouldn't be able to do without the people who use the system to provide you the service.
Looking at it with a larger lens.
And that's the way you have to look at it. The example that I've oftentimes given is when my mother was in 3 different hospitals in the Dallas area over a 6-year period of time. And I can tell you that everybody who went to visit her drove. Nobody took the bus. However, the amenities that the various hospitals could offer to us as family members, as well as the employees that they could attract, I could attribute to the frequency of public transportation that they had.
So how'd that play out for you? Like, how did you see that?
Well, I'll tell you. In one hospital, for example, had service that went right by it. The downside is that, it wasn't as frequent, and you have a challenge getting the people who are respiratory therapists, the people who get rooms ready for your loved one to move into if they're going through emergency. And that was the way my mother always went in, was through emergency. So the wait time was very, very long for that to happen. At some point, we went to a different hospital and the wait time was shorter, but also the amenities that we as family members had. Cafeteria had longer hours, greater variety of food, those kinds of things. And the one in which my mother actually transitioned in had a cafeteria that was 22 hours, and they had omelets made to order. And so, again, you may not use it, but people that you love and depend on, they do.
And I can't help but draw a direct line between that story then and the labor issues that we're having now.
Oh, there's no question. And so one of the things that we have to do, and we're going to do, is we transform SMART. And when I use transform, from my perspective, it'll be a continuous thing. It's not just we're going to transform it now and it's done. It's going to be continual transformation. Let's take a look at the iPhone and how the iPhone has changed the world in terms of how we do things. You think about how you board a plane. Most of the people who board planes now are using their phones to do it, regardless of what their age is. There are books out there that have been written for seniors to use an iPhone or an Android to show them how, because pretty soon that's all you're going to be able to get. So the world is changing, and we have to be able to deal with that. COVID and how it is changing how business is done and how employees work is going to change how we deliver service.
I think about that too in the realm of being into transit and transit history. We have so many routes and things that still have roots back to a time where we had factories for tanks and where auto plants were in certain areas. And we really haven't evolved our route map in a lot of ways from that older kind of model.
Most transit systems, their core systems are predicated when there were manufacturing jobs. And a lot of the work was done that way. 3 to 11, 11 to 7, 7 to 3 kind of things. As the country has changed into more of a service economy and more service jobs, those hours don't work.
For sure. I can't tell you how many times I've talked to people who they work at a bar or a restaurant or something like that, and they get off at 12 or something. There's no one there to help them.
The thing is that if you look at it from a business perspective, if I'm going to open a business, I'm going to need human beings to do it. I don't care what business you have. Even if you have some automation, you still have to have human beings to oversee the automation. So what we have to be able to do is use different tools that are available to us as a transit organization to be able to provide that service. So one of the things that I've talked about and we're moving towards is, instead of being SMART, the transit system, SMART, the mobility manager. You may be aware that we have had, I believe it's 5 pilot on-demand flex zones. Mm-hmm. Well, it is our intention as we go forward is to expand that system-wide.
And for someone who doesn't know what a flex zone is.
For someone who doesn't know what a flex zone is, you know what Uber is. Mm-hmm. So it's the same concept. So in a lot of places, Uber has something called Uber Pool. So, if you pull up the Uber app, you have everything from Uber XL, Uber Black, all the way down to Uber Pool. And Uber Pool is something where the ride is cheaper, but you know that you may have to share it with someone in order to be able to get to where you want to go. That's what we're looking to do, is to deploy a single application that lets you plan your trip, pay for your trip, and ride on all of our service. So when you plan your trip, you say that you're going to, just like you would do on, say, Google Maps, I want to go from here to here. It will give you choices of how you can get there. You can do this on the bus. You can do this on Flex to take it to this fast route and do this. And at some point, it will also have integrations with Lyft and Uber and bikes and scooters and the whole 9 yards. But one of the things that we know is that in order for people to use our service, it has to be convenient to them. So that's what we're working towards. And what we're talking about is making sure that wherever you are in the socioeconomic strata, wherever you are in whether you're a millennial or a baby boomer, this is service you can use. I think about, as I've heard in lots of places, a silver tsunami. Well, if you've had the misfortune to have to take your parents' keys, they've lost independence. And what we want is for SMART to be able to give them that independence back. They may not be able to drive, but they can still do what they would like to do, whether it's go to the movies, go to the grocery store, whatever the case may be.
And not have to bug people about it, because there's a sense of pride with that.
Exactly. So that's the independence piece. And quite frankly, we know that younger generation, I know everybody, when you say the term millennial, people just kind of...
Newsflash, millennials, we're kind of a big deal now.
Well, millennials are the largest demographic in the United States. And last research that I saw, by 2025, they're going to have 75% of the jobs in the United States. Mm-hmm. And how that demographic sees the world is very different than how their parents did. And so we have to be able to do that. And in a lot of ways, depending on where you are in the baby boom spectrum, and where you are on the millennial spectrum, some of your issues are exactly the same. You want to be able to do things, and you realize that having a car in your garage is not the most cost-effective thing.
On top of that, you look even farther past that to the Z's, you have lifestyle choices where they're going, there are polls and things where it's like, well, would you rather have a car or a phone?
Yes.
And they're going to pick the phone.
Well, it's Zipcar in the early 2000s did a survey just like that. They gave millennials a choice between a smartphone and a car. The overwhelming majority said a smartphone. If I got a smartphone, I can go anywhere I want to go. I don't need a car. When you look at the changes in cities where you're finding more and more people who are wanting to move into the downtown areas, not necessarily everybody wants to have sprawl. In order to be able to do that, a car is an incredible expense. You also, if you do the research, you see more and more of that generation getting their driver's license later. Vehicle registrations are down. And even Ford and GM, and I know that this is Motor City, but they're not even planning to go back to pre-pandemic levels of production for automobiles and trucks.
You hear that word mobility out of them too, even up at this conference. They know what's coming. Ford wouldn't dump all the money they're dumping into Michigan Central and what they're doing if they didn't see that too.
So the fact is that this is the future. If you look at what businesses are looking for 20 years ago versus today, you could get a business to come to an area or expand to an area if you had some cheap land somewhere and provided a tax abatement or something along those lines. Now it's about, okay, the first thing is, do I have access to talent? And can the talent get me there? As you know, Amazon, which obviously significant presence across the United States and the world, when they were looking for one of the criteria for their second headquarters that everybody was competing for was talent and transit. And there are probably 15 metropolitan areas in the United States that had the transportation network that they were looking for.
So you're really looking at this in a different way of saying, okay, before I always would say even like smart bus, everyone thinks about it as the bus, but instead looking at it in the idea of like, what is the job that needs to be done? That you need to get to work, you need to get your appointment,
you need to get your access.
Right. So, but does that preclude things like the FAST has been very successful along those routes? Is that something that you're looking at doing more with?
Oh, absolutely. What I'm saying is I'm not talking about shrinking the tools. I'm talking about expanding the tools.
Okay. So you're looking, let's grow the thing.
As we started this conversation, let's meet people where they are. This is an example that I have given on more than one occasion. People have no problem with the airline industry, but the airline industry is public transportation.
It's true.
You take a flight with somebody you don't know. There's a possibility that you could sit next to somebody who snores or somebody who smells bad. That does happen in a very expensive seat. And you think of the things that you have to go to get on a plane to make sure that when you do so, it's safe. That's still public transportation. It's still got a schedule, and you still have to plan based on, depending on where you go, it may not be as frequent as you want to, or you may not be able to get a nonstop. You may have to be able to get a connection. There are lots of things that you have to do in order to be able to do that. So let's take that a step further. Southwest Airlines and Delta Airlines, let's compare the two. Southwest Airlines has one plane that they fly, 737. They don't fly anything else. It doesn't matter. If they acquire an airline, anything that's not a 737, they get rid of it.
Yeah.
And Southwest has certain criteria for airports that it will go to. It will not go to just any airport. It goes to airports where they can turn their planes around quickly. That's why they go to Midway and don't go to O'Hare. So that being said, Delta Airlines has a variety of plane sizes to be able to serve small and medium markets. So that's what we are talking about doing here, is being able to deploy equipment that allows us to be able to go to different markets. And the other thing is just like this podcast with you, much more outreach and education about transit. Oftentimes people complain about empty buses. Well, depending on when you see it, it could be a plane is empty at the terminal and a street's empty at 2:00 in the morning. So part of what we have to be able to do is a much better job of marketing and a much better job of educating people on really what public transportation is and what mobility is and what it means. So for example, when there's a new job that comes to Southeast Michigan, some big employer decides to bring 2,000 new jobs.
Right, we just had the Ford announcement, for instance.
Obviously, it's only 2,000 jobs. Everybody here is not going to get that.
But it's still on the front page of all the things.
Well, but what it's going to do is it is going to increase tax revenue from property taxes. And so therefore, that property tax revenue means that your cities and counties can provide more service without necessarily raising your tax rate. And the more businesses that come in makes your property value greater. One of the things that attracts business is access to talent. And businesses across this country, when they are looking to do things, even in Southeast Michigan, are looking to see how can I get talent to me. National Cash Register used to be in Dayton, Ohio. They moved from Dayton, Ohio to suburban Atlanta to Gwinnett County. They just moved to Midtown Atlanta. Why? Because it's easier for the next generation of employee to get there.
So I got a couple of threads to pull on
Sure.
that. Number one, when you're talking about the different types of airplane in your analogy there, that makes me think about the variable population density in our region. The area you serve, you got everything from the Grosse Points, which is, halfway to Chicago as far as density, right? All the way out to like Lake Orion, which is basically rural.
Uh-huh.
And that is a real challenge to get people around to.
Well, but see, it's about also managing expectation and taking advantage of technology that is there. So one of the differences that we see that's a difference between us and, say, Uber is Uber's business model assumes when its contractors choose to go to work. For us, using the same kind of technology and algorithm, we have more equipment so we can make sure that we have equipment that's there that's available when someone wants it.
Well, and the other side of that is that you don't have to make a profit.
Let's just put it this way. Not necessarily so much about a profit, but to the extent that we help generate jobs here, we have an impact on the region's economy.
Right. It also keeps prices down. That's more of my point.
Right. So I don't look at it so much about smart doesn't make a profit, but what I do look about is that when Amazon decides to build a warehouse, they come to Smart and say, do you serve it? If we don't serve it or can't serve it, then okay, they'll move it somewhere else. And so my point with all of that is that being able to provide that service means more jobs here, which means more investment here, and Smart is part of that. So part of what we are going to embark upon is to show what our economic impact is to the region.
Because that's a question that, there's a lot of debates about access. You'll see a lot of news stories about that, but people don't talk about that overall economic impact, and because I don't think they have the numbers.
But it has been done in other places and will be done. For every dollar that we get locally, we get $1.34 in state and federal funding. So just the local funding by itself doesn't pay for Smart. And we're also going to be very aggressive with this administration and the Build Back Better and all of those things about seeing how we can increase our federal funding. Also, we have jobs. We need bus operators. We need mechanics. We need people to clean buses. We need accountants. We need grants people. We need a lot of different people. And as our system grows, that means that we will have more people. Our budget this year is between $140 and $150 million. We're going to be spending money in this community to buy products in order to be able to put this product out. So we're going to be looking at how we can make sure that there's equity in terms of how we contract and who we contract with and what have you. So a lot of those things are things that people don't think about. Smart's going to be transparent. Smart's going to be accountable. And so we're going to be working on a report card, if you will, that as we revise our website, that will have this information about how we're performing so that people can see what we're doing. We're not going to be in the shadows.
I think that's a really smart move because when I traveled recently to Chicago, you got a thing from the CTA. Like you knew like the CTA was an option wherever you were. And I feel like, and I'm not going to throw Smart under the proverbial bus here, but I think this is something that happens a lot in Metro Detroit is that we fund something or we think of a plan or we want to do something, but then we don't bother telling people about it. And then we wonder why people don't show.
As part of what we are doing in terms of our budget process is we are investing in marketing. We're going to do significant investment in terms of how we communicate digitally with our various social media platforms. We're on Facebook, we're on Twitter, but we're going to be on Instagram. I want us to get on TikTok. We're going to enhance our LinkedIn profile so that we can be more attractive to people. We've got to get people to where they are. Again, I believe it was Ted Koppel. He was talking about all of the steps when he was a reporter in Vietnam that it took to get a story in Vietnam to get on the air. Now you can do it live.
Yeah.
The technological changes. Walter Cronkite was the most trusted person in America, because that was who people looked to for news. And for those of you who are on here who may not know who that is, Googling, you can find him. But now, people don't look at the 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock news. They don't look at, there are some people who still look at the ABC News and what have you. But back in the day, those names were iconic. Now, people get their news through Twitter. They get their news through Facebook. They get their news through a lot of different areas. And to be quite honest, again, going back to both Ted Koppel and Van Jones, is that, if you don't get your message out, somebody else will, but it won't necessarily be your message.
Well, that's part of it too, right? Because with that decline and with that fracturization of media, it's important that organizations tell their own stories.
Exactly.
So I would be remiss if I didn't ask you, we've got that millage renewal coming up. Feels like all of this is like a really big push to help make that case for a number of cities. Smart has a unique situation where you have some areas that can opt out, some that are full county, all of that. I imagine that you have a pretty strong feeling about the matter.
Well, I would like for it to get on the ballot and pass, of course. I'm a taxpayer too. So let's don't get it twisted. So I look at this money like it's my money because I pay tax at every level. And so I mentioned the $1.34. I pay federal tax, I pay state tax. I may not necessarily be a homeowner right now, but I'm still paying tax that goes to SMART. Mm-hmm. And it is our responsibility to use those tax dollars wisely. So having said all of that, I think that people need to be able to see what they're getting. And I look at it as though any business, and if you don't get people to come to work for you and want to stay at work, then you can't provide that product. So all of what we're doing is part and parcel the same thing. I want people to see that their SMART is going to meet them where they are, that it's going to be sooner rather than later. Because if I told you that the things that we're planning about doing are going to happen 5 years down the road, you'd say, well, what are you here for? So there are things that we're doing as it relates to the expansion, the flex service, and the application and what have you, that a year from now, I'm hoping that we've deployed.
And that seems like a much more aggressive timeline. Like you're someone who you want to get things done.
Oh, absolutely. Go big or go home.
That's definitely a different view for this conversation. I think people need a vision to get behind.
Well, I'll tell you what, maybe in a subsequent podcast, we can talk more about the message that we're communicating. But at the end of the day, this is about independence and mobility. This is what this is about. If you have mobility and access and independence, you can do a lot of stuff. Your quality of life is so much better. You think about it. Quality of life is about access. If you can't get somewhere, I don't care where that is that you want to go, then your quality of life is impacted. If you can't go on the vacation that you want to go on, you're not happy about that. If you can't go to work, if there's a great job, but you can't get there, there's a problem with that. So there are a lot of different variables at play here that we want to make sure that we address. And I also want to make sure that we manage expectations. An example that I give oftentimes is weight loss. So at one point, I lost a lot of weight. And so I couldn't see the weight loss because I saw me every day. But people who would go 4 months and see me, they would see the weight loss immediately. So that's what I'm asking for people to see, is there will be incremental changes, and there are incremental changes happening right now. It's going to take a minute. And so we're going to be doing a lot more in terms of, as I stated earlier, being able to show where we are, where we're trying to get to, and where we are in the process so that people can see that.
Well, I'm looking forward to the next conversation as this comes together and you get more time on the ground and under your belt, because I think that there are some real opportunities here to just set a course that will help build the entire region up.
Oh, there's no question about that. What I want to do is, much like I used the example in Cincinnati, the plan is in place. I'm not there, but they've got it. This is about putting something in place that will be continual. And so that's what it's about. You know, you asked me earlier about why here. Well, one, contrary to what a lot of people may think, I love the weather here. I like the winters. It may sound a little twisted, but, you know, people who grew up in the South in the heat like the winters, just like people who grew up in the Midwest with the winters like the heat. But I really think that, and I'm excited about the part of being part of a renaissance for the area.
Well, Dwight Ferrell, I appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Well, that was an interesting conversation. I'm looking forward to seeing how this develops and how this plan unfolds and talking to him in the future and bringing that all to you. Of course, if you've got feedback, dailydetroit@gmail.com. Love to hear from you. All right, I'm Jer Stays. Remember that tomorrow Fletcher Sharp is in. We're going to talk all things Detroit City FC, big tie with Pittsburgh, big game ahead, and of course, our 1000th episode celebration this Friday at the Congregation during happy hour. Make sure to stop by. We would love to see you. All right, from Detroit's beautiful North End, take care of each other. Remember that you are somebody, and we'll see you around Detroit.